Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Friday morning. Great to be with you on a Friday morning, July 24th, as we wrap up another week. And it's going to be a great program. And we have a little bit of a technical issue this morning, but we're working through it. And we find the alternatives to bring you a show live every day. So here we are. Coming up first after the news and the weather, we're going to chat with Father Timothy Gallagher. I'm really excited about this. He's amazing. And we're talking about his book, Thinking Like a Saint, Discernment of Spirits in the Catholic Tradition. Now, Father is a much respected spiritual leader and retreat leader, and he's very familiar to our EWTN audience because he's a frequent speaker on the network and his podcasts. He also does audio retreats and video retreats as well, and they're utilized throughout the English-speaking Catholic world. So this is a real treat, and I know you love the saints as much as I do, so we'll be talking about what the saints can teach us about discernment. And we're so blessed to have, if you can believe it, over 10,000 saints in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. So looking forward to our time for about 15 minutes with Father Timothy Gallagher right after the weather and the news. And then for Fact Check Friday, I want to take another look at this decision by France to ban social media for teens under 15. Found an interesting report that interviewed some students who are studying at an international school in Paris. And it's refreshing because many of these young people realize how much time they waste and how the media, social media in particular, may be impacting them. So we'll take a look at that. And then I'm excited to have another great religious joining us. We have Bishop Thomas, Daniel Thomas in the Diocese of Toledo. In addition to being a wonderful bishop in the Diocese of Toledo, not too far from us here in Michigan, he is also the head of the USCCB Committee on Pro-Life Activities. So we're going to be taking a look at how Catholic bishops and other organizations have warned the administration that IVF destroys human embryonic life, and how they're encouraging the department to support life-affirming fertility treatments. It's not that they're against, right, couples who are trying to have children. Obviously, we're pro-life from womb to tomb, but there's so much confusion on this issue, and so many people misunderstand what the church is saying on this. So looking forward to chatting with the bishop regarding the powerful letter that they sent to the administration regarding IVF. And in the second hour of the program on EWTN Radio Extra, we have our very own EWTN employee chaplain, Father John Paul Mary, joining us to talk about the Holy Father's recent remarks last month. And he said this several times. He's reiterating this, especially while he's on vacation at Castel Gandolfo, talking about making time for prayer and silence, which really works into what we're discussing with Father Gallagher, because the saints are encouraging us always to do the same. And I'll look at that in two senses as well. And the gospel for today is really, I think, very apropos for what we'll be discussing. So this will be great. Father John Paul Mary will join us, and he'll wrap up our program on a Friday morning. So I do hope you can stay tuned for the entire 2 hours. Weather-wise, we have excessive rainfall potential for the southeast, a heat expansion for the center of the nation, and some critical fire weather up in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, here's more details. Flash flooding threatening areas from the Tennessee Valley to the Carolinas as storms repeat along a stalled front. And we have very heavy storms that may trigger flooding in the Southwest. Dangerous heat expanding across the desert Southwest Plains and the Mississippi Valley and Southern Tier, and critical fire weather for the interior Pacific Northwest, cooler, drier air bringing relief to the Great Lakes and the Northeast. That's a look at the forecast this morning, and of course our lineup for a Friday. Happy Friday, or as I like to say, Friday. We need to get started though. It's already 4 minutes past the hour. Let's take a look at the news right now here on EWTN. Today marks 1 month since the landscape and lives changed in Venezuela following twin devastating earthquakes, leaving over 5,000 people dead and tens of thousands still missing. South Florida's Global Empowerment Mission is working around the clock to send over 2 million pounds of food and medical supplies to survivors.
Every day we have things arriving between planes and containers have already started leaving. They should be en route and arriving first. July 31st should be the first round of containers arriving, but we're constantly sending every week.
That's the logistics director for the organization, Billy Richards, who says they cannot do it alone. The organizational-based charity needs volunteers, they say, at its warehouse to still help pack life-saving equipment and necessary kits. Now, the Catholic bishops in Venezuela have issued a message entitled Good Samaritan's Witness of Hope. The bishops say the tragedy has further worsened Venezuela's already very difficult social, political, and economic situation. They're insisting that reconstruction must not be driven by political interests or corruption that could once again put people's lives at risk. They also voiced concern over what they described as the failure of public institutions to respond adequately to the emergency. They say reconstruction requires us to echo the indignation of the earthquake victims who were left without adequate assistance by public institutions. They say natural disasters are unpredictable, but it is a duty of the state authorities to be prepared to respond to them. The Department of Justice sending a memorandum to federal departments and agencies with updated guidance on religious liberty and parental rights protections based on recent U.S. Supreme Court precedent. The update, according to EWTNnews.com, issued yesterday, is the first revision to the guidance since 2017. It incorporates Supreme Court rulings issued after the earlier guidance, including rules on church autonomy, equal access for religious entities to grants and government programs, as well as the right for parents to direct the religious upbringing of their children. Religious liberty is not merely a right to personal religious beliefs or even to worship in a particular place, the memorandum said. It also encompasses religious observance and practice as displayed in a person's daily life. EWTN explains the update adds, even in the absence of a Title VII exemption, both RFRA, or the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and the principle of Title IX exemption, the principle of church autonomy under the religion clauses of the Constitution protect religious employers' authority to make employment decisions consistent with their religious mission. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says any action Iran takes against the United States will be met with overwhelming force.
I saw Arachi, their foreign minister, who the other day say or something about their policies, an eye for an eye. The president's policy is a head for an eye. I mean, honestly, that's what it's going to be. I mean, they will pay a very heavy price for the things they're doing. They're already paying a very heavy price.
Rubio issuing that warning yesterday at a summit of Asian nations in the Philippines. Both the U.S. and Iran have accused each other of violating the terms of a ceasefire agreement that was signed last month. President Trump, meanwhile, says he is nearing a big decision on a massive attack against Iran. Speaking to Axios, the president saying the strikes will be bigger than the ones conducted during Operation Epic Fury. The president did not give a deadline for when he would make that decision. In New York City, Mayor Zohran Mamdani is telling residents there to take to the streets to protest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he visits the Big Apple in September. And the police department in New York is expressing great concerns. The Police Benevolent Association president, Patrick Hendry, said the mayor's activist posturing puts police officers on the street in a terrible position. He said protests during the UN General Assembly are nothing new, but when the mayor of the city is actively calling for demonstrations, violent agitators will assume then that they have permission to cause as much havoc as possible. New York Post reporting the mayor was forced to backtrack this week by admitting he did not have the power to have the Israeli leader arrested, but he did urge his residents to protest Netanyahu, which the police say is more work for them. The prime minister, by the way, again expected to attend the UN General Assembly coming up in September. President Trump announcing a commitment from major utilities and companies that consumers will not bear the extra electricity costs of the AI data center expansions across the U.S. Speaking from the EPA headquarters yesterday, Trump detailing the update ratepayer protection pledge meant to reduce the burden of potentially skyrocketing electric bills for consumers while still keeping an edge in the AI race.
Under this groundbreaking plan, America's largest tech companies have formally committed to fund or build all energy infrastructure required to meet the demand they are placing on the grid.
Trump saying the plan includes letting the tech companies build their own power plants. The White House says major utilities, including NextEra and Duke Energy, have signed on the ratepayer protection pledge along with Google, Microsoft, Meta, Oracle, OpenAI, and Amazon. This as opposition to data center grows, leading some states to consider construction moratoriums. And 2 stabbings on Manhattan's Upper West Side are now being investigated as possible hate crimes. Jonathan O'Harlan tells us a police commission says a suspect was yelling Allah Akbar during both attacks.
NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch is now identifying the suspect as 51-year-old Raul Morales. Police say he approached and stabbed 2 people, seemingly unprovoked, in separate instances minutes apart around 1:30 Thursday afternoon. Both of the victims are expected to survive. Tisch says victim and witness statements say Morales shouted pro-Islamic statements prior to both stabbings, and that the NYPD is now looking into if the attacks were hate crimes. In New York, I'm Jonathan O'Halloran.
The remnants of Tropical Storm Bertha now moving across eastern Texas. That, according to the latest National Hurricane Center update, the storm's wind speeds have slowed down to 35 miles per hour as it loses steam. And Mark Mayfield explains a heat advisory continuing until Monday evening, with triple-digit weather expected in many of California's inland and valley locations.
The National Weather Service says highs could hit 107 and overnight temperatures won't cool off as much as normal. There's also an air quality alert in place for the San Fernando, San Gabriel, and Santa Clarita valleys. The hot weather is making smog worse in many locations. I'm Mark Mayfield.
In Florida, dozens of people facing major drug charges, this after a multi-agency takedown in Palm Coast and in the Daytona Beach area. Attorney General James Uthenmeyer says Operation Icebreaker 2 has netted some pretty big results.
They were caught trafficking and conspiring to traffic large amounts of fentanyl, meth, and cocaine into our communities.
Over the past year and a half, fentanyl cases are down in Florida over 70% and deaths are down over 50%. Buddy says statewide prosecutions are up 500% since the initiative began 2 years ago. And there are more child predators being arrested nationwide and in southeastern Michigan. The FBI Detroit Assistant Special Agent in charge, Marty D'Amico, was asked if the uptick in that area of the country is because there are more predators out there or are more of them being caught.
I think it's twofold. These predators are very prevalent, but what's become more, I guess, better for us, a better way to identify them is we're putting this public awareness out there.
D'Amico says the Endangered Child Alert Program that launched in 2004 to help identify people in child sexual abuse and the production of child porn has been very, very helpful. And a delay in calling federal agents may have hurt the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. That's according to the FBI Director Kash Patel telling Fox News he was ready to deploy his staff to Guthrie's Southern Arizona home on day one, but they were kept out, he says.
The first 48 hours of anyone's disappearance are the most critical. And here's how these cases works. It is a state matter. It's a state and local law enforcement matter. What we, the FBI, do is say, hey, we're here to help. What do you need? What can we do? And for 4 days, we were kept out of the investigation.
Patel credits his team working with Google to retrieve critical video footage of the suspect. He also tells the outlet more information may have been available if they had gotten access to the video earlier. The mother of the Today Show host, Savannah Guthrie, has been missing since February 1st. And it is a Friday morning, and our final story just want to share with you. Far fewer Americans than expected finding themselves filing first-time requests for unemployment benefits last week. Labor Department saying it's received 187,000 initial filings ending July 18th, marking a decline of 22,000 from the previous week. We're talking Saints up next. Hope you can join us with Father Gallagher. It's going to be great. We realize sometimes, or if we take them for granted, I know I took the saints for granted for so many years, the depth and the wisdom and the material that they provide us in terms of how to grow closer to the Lord and his church that he founded, of course, on the rock St. Peter. This beautiful book by our friend, Father Timothy Gallagher, can help us with that. Thinking Like a Saint, Discernment of Spirits in the Catholic Tradition. Now, in this book, I'm sure you'll have a favorite, including Augustine, Francis of Assisi, Thomas Aquinas, Thomas A. Kempis, my fave, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Therese of Lisieux, Francis de Sales, and more. Father, great to have you on the program again. This is pretty exciting. Congrats on the new book.
Yeah, and thank you for having me on there. The goal here was to present, to put together a book that would be easy to read, relatively short, and would present in a very practical way the wisdom of St. Ignatius of Loyola in his Rules for Discernment, which are about navigating the ups and downs of the daily spiritual life. But not only, this time what's really new here is to look at, his text is very condensed, and who better to comment on it than the other saints and spiritual writers in our Catholic spiritual tradition. So we give his content for each rule and then an abundance of quotes from parallel saints who say things along the same way, comment on what he says, and amplifies it even more. So my hope is that this is a very easily read and very practical tool for living the daily spiritual life.
I think most of us understand what discernment means. Obviously, you're discerning a decision, you're discerning a vocation, but you refer to the discernment of spirits. Can you give us some more detail on that and what that looks like?
Yeah, that is navigating what I call the ups and downs in the daily spiritual life. The formal language for that would be spiritual consolation, the times when prayer is alive and we feel God's closeness and there's energy for spiritual things. And then spiritual desolation, which is the contrary. And we all go through these times, and there's no shame in that and no surprise. It's just living the spiritual life in a fallen but redeemed and loved world. And so those are the times when it's hard to even get ourselves to pray, and all that energy for spiritual things seems to have waned some way. And we often don't even understand why this is happening. We don't know exactly what is happening. And it can be very discouraging. We can feel like there's something wrong with me, or I'm the only one who goes through this. And Ignatius, with great wisdom and practicality and love, steps into that area and says, no, it's not. This is normal in the spiritual life. Here's how you understand it, and here's what you do about it. So what it does is it just sheds enormous light on the as I keep saying, the daily spiritual life, which is almost all of the spiritual life, and that's why it's so important. And for 40 years now, I've been teaching this to people, and I just can't tell you the difference this makes in people's lives. You know, Teresa, I guess if I had one thing to say in this conversation, above all, it would be to beg anyone listening to please learn those rules. Because those of us who know them know why I say that. Those of us who don't, if you do learn them, you'll understand why I say that. It can change everything in a beautiful way in the spiritual life.
Talking with Father Timothy Gallagher about his latest book, Thinking Like a Saint, Discernment of Saints in the Catholic Tradition. It's published by our friends at Ignatius Press. Now, it's not available in our religious catalog yet, but it will be very soon. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, we'll give you an update when it is available. So, Father, one of the things you mentioned in the book, in a big theme, and this is something that I relate to all the time, this idea of silence. We're so busy, all of us, and there's so much noise in our lives on so many levels. Why is this so essential? We're going to be talking about this because the Holy Father just mentioned this more than once in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to be talking about this in the second hour of the program as well. But why is silence so important?
Because it's the gateway to any life of discernment in the way that we're speaking about it. The first of all steps in order to navigate this up and down daily spiritual experience is to notice it, is to be aware of it. Sometimes when I present the rules, I'll ask people this question, and maybe we're in late morning at this time. What was in your heart? What was stirring in your heart? And what was in your thoughts when you awoke and rose this morning? Did you even notice? And what can happen if we begin to notice that? Now, the presupposition of noticing that is an awareness which is only made possible by a certain amount of recollection and the silence that makes that possible. And you see this throughout Scripture. You see it in all the saints. And Jesus himself, at the beginning of his ministry, goes out to the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And you see him kind of as a rhythm in his active ministry, pulling away from time to time just to be alone with his Father and for prayer. And so to find those spaces, and it can be as simple as not having the radio on or the phone on in the car. It can be just looking for those spaces that we can find in the day, or times when our hands are busy and our minds can be free. That is the beginning of what permits, I'd say both prayer and then the life of discernment, which arises naturally when we have that relationship with the Lord. So in the first chapter, it is the first chapter. I've given an abundance of quotes there. I'll just mention one, and this is from Simone Weil, who came very close to Christ by the end of her life, her short life. And she says that attention, that's her word for this, 15 minutes of attention is better than a great many good works. And the reason for that is because it permits this kind of growth.
Now, I even think the gospel today regarding the parable of the sower, if you think about the seed sown on the path, you can hear the word of God. But if you don't have the understanding, or if it's falling on rocky ground, the rocky ground could be the noise in our lives, could it not, Father?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's very much there in what our Lord is saying, that the word can't take root because it's sort of swept away by just the number of things. You know, a phrase of St. Augustine is coming to mind when he looks back on those years when he was far from God. And he says, you were within, that is within my heart and in my mind working, but I was without, just engaged in 1,000 things. When we begin to be within enough so that we begin to be aware of the Lord's constant work in our hearts and in our thoughts, that's when the transformation begins to happen.
So what are some of the most common mistakes we make when we're trying to discern God's will? What do you think, Father?
Well, I'd say maybe the most basic need is prayer. You can't discern God's will and choices that we face without prayer. So that would be, I'd say, the first of all things would be when you're faced with a choice and you really want to know God's will and do God's will, take it to prayer and reflection. And then it's just prudent if it's a choice that you face. St. Thomas calls this taking counsel, before coming to a judgment about the wise or prudent thing to do. Make sure you have all the relevant information so that you can discern well. Be in touch with the people who may be involved in this as well. If your spouse is going to be involved, say it's a new job or a transfer of the family and so forth. But Teresa, I've written a whole book on this, which is called Discerning the Will of God, an Ignatian Guide to Christian Decision Making. So there you get a much more complete answer that I can give. Maybe just one more thing I'll mention. If there's a timeline before you can make your choice, use all the time. Don't wait. Let's say that the boss says, this opportunity has come up for you. I need your answer within 3 weeks. We'll start today in the process of discernment. Use all the time, pray, and do your best and trust that that's all the Lord ever asks. He'll get you where he needs you if you're doing your best.
Yeah. And I do think that when you are, putting it in God's hands and praying every day, reading scripture, talking to those close to you, if you have someone who is your spiritual director, even maybe going to talk to your pastor or priest, God is going to start giving you some signs, but we have to be aware. Things will pop up. Someone will contact us. We may come across a sign on the street in front of a church. We may see a particular scripture verse in the morning. So there's all these little things that will happen when you're doing this, as you said, this constant practice of discernment.
Very much so, and I think that's really exactly what I was trying to say in saying that prayer is always the basis of discernment. And it gets right back to the awareness.
Father, we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, that's my fault. I got so carried away with the interview, but we've been talking with Father Timothy Gallagher, Thinking Like a Saint, Discernment of Spirits in the Catholic Tradition, and it comes from Ignatius Press. We'll also have it soon on the EWTN Religious Catalog. We'll be right back. 27 minutes past the hour. It's Fact Check Friday on Friday, July 24th. Thanks so much for joining us. I was mentioning the gospel for today to our wonderful guest, Father Gallagher, in the previous segment. Let me just share it with you if you haven't done your readings yet this morning. But it struck me when I was doing the readings that this is very appropriate for our discussions today, not only with Father Timothy, but of course with our next guest, Father John Palmieri, coming up in the second hour of the program. So this is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, verses 18 to 23. Jesus said to his disciples, "Hear the parable of the sower. The seed sown on the path is the one who hears the word of the kingdom without understanding. And the evil one comes and steals away what was sown in his heart. The seed sown on rocky ground is the one who hears the word and receives it at once with joy, but he has no root and lasts only for a time. When some tribulation or persecution comes because of the word, he immediately falls away. The seed sown among thorns is one who hears the word, but then worldly anxiety and the lure of riches choke the word, and it bears no fruit. But the seed sown on rich soil is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Now, what does it have to do with our topic for today? We're going to talk a little bit more about the latest ban by a country of social media for teens. And I'll explain the connection here. I'm going to share a brief report with you as well. So France became, as you may have heard earlier this week, we did report it, the first EU country to ban social media for children. French lawmakers voted this week to ban social media use for children under the age of 15, making it the first country in the European Union to introduce such an age limit. Australia making history late last year when it implemented the first ban on social media for teens under 16. The British government announcing similar restrictions expected to come into effect next year. Spain, Greece, and Denmark are also planning to impose minimum age limits for social media use. And you may recall that we've done some stories also here on Catholic Connection about a new survey that came out, I think it was in May, or maybe in June, I can't remember, but it was very recent. And it showed that parents spend more time on their media devices during dinner than their children do. So the family is all together, they're in the house, they're sitting down for dinner, but they're together alone. Somebody's on the cell phone, somebody's on their laptop, somebody is checking messages, and the parents are spending more time doing that during the crucial meal times than the children. So it's obvious that the social media and the influence of media in our lives is affecting every single one of us. You can't get away from it. And that's normal in a sense that we're all busy and the phone is a lifeline. We get that, and we all struggle with it. But I think that these bans are very good. I think it's very helpful. And I think that we as adults need to check ourselves as well, and also make sure that we're very involved in terms of the young people with whom we're close or we associate. For example, if we're in, an educational environment, such as whether OCIA or teaching young people the faith, or even in our own families, it's gotten so bad to the point where people are isolated because of the amount, just that example I gave you in terms of dinner time. And if you think about what Father was saying and what this scripture is saying today, what the gospel is saying today, the importance for silence, because we're not going to hear God or God's word, the messages God is trying to send us through prayers, through other people, through scripture, is going to fall on rocky ground because our minds are too busy with all this information we're getting. And think about how it impacts young people as well. So we found an interesting report. We want to play it for you now. And what I liked about this report is the children, the young people they interviewed, many of them get what's going on, even though they know they may miss some aspects of social media. They understand, Houston, we have a problem. So here's this report, and then we'll come back on the other side of it.
France has become the first EU country to ban social media for under 15s, following in the footsteps of Australia, who'd banned social media for under 16s, and the United Kingdom, which had announced a similar project for children there. The idea is that children under 15 will, from September 1st, no longer be able to set up any accounts on social media, and from January 2027, any existing accounts will be discontinued. The idea was one of the ones that Emmanuel Macron had announced would be one of his flagship measures for his second term. It's expected to take effect from September. We had a chance to speak to some school children at the International School here in Paris about what they thought.
I use certain apps to see what people are doing, to see where they've been, and what the kind of things that they're doing are.
So do you think you're going to miss it?
Yeah, I think I would, yeah.
With social media, people often compare themselves with other people, and that's just unhealthy and it's bad for people's mental health. I'll probably have a little bit more free time, which I might be able to spend with friends, which I think is, a little bit better than on social media. But I think I won't be able to do, I like gaming and I like social media. I like doing those things. So it's a little bit sad not to be able to, share my accomplishments or not to be able to, get updates as quickly on things,
Other European countries like Spain, Greece and Denmark are also looking at similar legislation, and EU-wide there is the possibility there may be a bloc-wide ban at some point. Ursula von der Leyen has set up a panel to look into the question of how better to protect children online.
So obviously this is an issue around the world. And as far as the numbers are concerned, in European countries, they're saying recent statistics show that at least half of 15-year-olds spend 30 hours or more per week on digital devices, including learning activities in or out of school. Now that's low compared to the United States. It's closer to 40 to 50 hours a week with young people here in the US. So it varies from country to country. But again, if we want to get closer to the Lord, and if we want our families to do the same, then we have to, as Father Gallagher said, think like a saint. We have to make sure that we are being open to what the Lord has to say by, talking in silence to God, in the sense of having that silence around us. So the daily meditation for today was beautiful from the Word Among Us, which ties into this. And they're talking about Jesus explaining the parable of the sower to his confused disciples. They're a little bit puzzled by this, but he tells them the seed is his word that he sows into the heart of each person. The different types of soil, the meditation says, represent some typical responses that people can have to his word. So the parable can inspire us to examine how prepared we are. And this word prepared is where the whole idea of silence, eliminating media influences come into play. How prepared we are to receive and understand what Jesus says to us, and also to ask how we can improve the quality of our own soil. So what does your soil look like? Is it ready for planting? Is it ready to accept the seeds that God is putting before us and planting, hopefully, in our hearts? If we are not doing a good job of monitoring the outside influences, we are not going to not only be able to think like a saint, but we're not going to hear from God. We're not going to, it's not because God's not reaching out to us, it's because we're not, basically getting ready, getting prepared, getting our soil prepared. We want the answers. We have to do the work as well. God is not going to force himself on us. He is there. He's always speaking. We just have to make sure that we're ready to listen and that the soil of our hearts is prepared to receive the seed that God is trying to plant in us. The sower, as in the Lord, knows us better than we know ourselves. And God gives everyone the opportunity. In terms of the sower, when the Lord is throwing the seeds, that's a farming term, broadcast. The word broadcast means to toss, to get it out there. So how is your soil today? Is it prepared to receive the seed, the word of God, to grow in your relationship with him? Very good. Such a wonderful leader in the church, our friend Bishop Daniel Thomas from the Diocese of Toledo, Ohio, born in Philadelphia and raised in Philadelphia, served as auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia before Holy Father Pope Francis. The late Pope Francis elevated him to take over the Diocese of Toledo back in 2014. He's the 8th Roman Catholic bishop of Toledo since its founding in 1910. Before that, he was a part of the Archdiocese of Cincinnati and the Diocese of Cincinnati as well, that was formed in 1821. And he has many responsibilities, of course, as a shepherd, including heading up the USCCB Committee on Pro-Life Activities. And we're going to talk about this morning is a recent story about the U.S. bishops urging the Labor Department in a very beautiful letter to reject the expansion of IVF insurance coverage. Your Excellency, always great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
Teresa, thank you. Good to be with you and your listeners as always. I appreciate the opportunity.
We were talking about this during the break, Your Excellency, about how important it is. Obviously, we're going to talk about you addressing the administration with this powerful letter, but I think this is such an opportunity for education. I was encouraging people when the letter first came out to read the letter, because it documents church teaching so well and explains why the church teaches what she teaches about IVF, because oftentimes people do react with emotion. They want a child. Infertility is a real issue. It's a heartbreaking issue. And they think the church is somehow being hypocritical, contradicting herself by saying, well, we're all in for pro-life, but we don't want people to use IVF. So talk to us about that in terms of helping people understand more deeply.
Very helpful, Teresa. And of course, we are totally pro-life, and that's why we proclaim that there are serious moral and ethical problems with IVF. So in a nutshell, we know that the desire to have children for married couples is very real. Infertility is heartbreaking for couples. But we also have to be mindful, of course, that there is no absolute right, to obtain a child or to demand something that we simply have to leave in God's hands. But, there are some statistics which are important. Some people may or may not know that IVF is in vitro fertilization. In vitro means in glass. So that an embryo is conceived and then placed in glass, and then later for the possible successful implantation within a womb. So it takes away that beautiful union of husband and wife in marital intercourse. It's interesting to note, Teresa, for every birth by IVF, there are other embryonic baby siblings who die in the process or are selectively killed because they're deemed too weak or are ultimately condemned to live frozen. And this, of course, the church teaches is a grave evil. So because sexual intimacy has two aspects, the power to unite married couples, unitive aspect, and the potential to create new life, a baby, which is the procreative aspect. And the church has always taught that those two things are inseparable. Now, certainly, every child is a gift from God. If a child is born that is the product of IVF, that child, of course, has dignity and value. But I think we have to ask ourselves, what is the other reality and option instead of IVF? So the church says that there is restorative reproductive medicine. Even if it's not perfect for everyone, it's a comprehensive, holistic approach, often able to identify and authentically heal underlying conditions that cause infertility while keeping conception within the marital act. So there are several possibilities if people listening can, receive that. And if they don't know it, there are several centers across the United States. And finding out more about NFP and doctors who practice restorative reproductive medicine is right on our USCCB website for NFP Week. So those are some of the things, because they'll say, well, we have no options. Well, yes, there are moral and ethical options, in fact.
So the public comment that you submitted, that the USCCB submitted, was a 17-page document addressed to the Labor Department.
People don't like long documents, Teresa.
Yeah, but no, I really appreciated it because, again, I think it helps us understand where the church is coming from, and also the attention to concerns of couples who are infertile, because, as you said earlier, this is a true heartbreak. I just want to read a couple of quotes, Your Excellency, and I'll let you jump in. Church affirms a deep desire of spouses to welcome children and supports medical efforts to address infertility. At the same time, public policy should not promote practices that undermine the dignity of human life or sever the connection between procreation and the marital act, which you just said. So this is something I think that is really important. But also then you look at the amount of children, babies that are left behind often. And I believe in the statement, and I'll have to pull up the exact quote, but there was a reference to the number of embryos a year, which is similar to the number of abortions a year in the United States.
And in fact, the government is basically proposing a new optional insurance system. That's what we're speaking about. Right. And the system includes coverage for IVF. And what people don't know is that IVF kills or freezes even more preborn children than abortion. So this is a critical question and issue for us. And we believe IVF is not the solution, ultimately, to infertility.
Right. And so you're encouraging them for their insurance, to expand the insurance coverage to include different options for families, correct, Your Excellency?
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And really, with you, Teresa, I know people really, they like to have facts, and that's what we want to provide. I think this letter is so helpful, as you mentioned, and it just steps through the facts. It's very clear. It's very practical. And I think for the reader, it really does offer the information that's necessary and the tools to be able to have something to speak about when we say this is what we're talking about. This is, that the rules should facilitate the conception of children, those types of things.
Absolutely. Talking with Bishop Daniel Thomas from the Diocese of Toledo and also head of the Pro-Life Committee for the Bishops. We're discussing the bishops in a beautiful letter they sent to the Labor Department, urging the Labor Department to reject expanding IVF insurance coverage. Now, I know this takes time, but when you file something like this, which this isn't your first rodeo, you've done this many times with the committee and in other important issues, what's the next step in terms of, do you hear back from them? What are you hoping for? What will be the church's next step in this, Your Excellency?
Well, as you can understand, our next steps are always continued advocacy. So we simply continue to teach, to preach, and to put out the truth about what these things are. Speaking, of course, always, the truth in charity. How many times have you heard me say that, Teresa? So
right.
And of course, we want to be able to accompany those parents who are struggling. We want to be able to help them carry their crosses. And we also want to help them to understand how the Lord might be calling them into a different, a different plan than what they might have regarding IVF. And to be open to the fact that, so many of couples who I have heard of, if they cannot have children, as we know, then they move possibly to adoption. If they cannot, they examine these restorative reproductive medicine possibilities and see where that might be able to take them. And I can tell you a number of people who were told that they were infertile and it was impossible, have in fact had children. So it's really not the absolute end. If one doctor says you're infertile, they really do. We need to encourage them to continue to be creative in reaching out to others. And obviously, we want to accompany them. We want to offer them resources. And for those, again, we have a free online parish kit available with resources explaining IVF and church teaching at respectlife.org. So these are the types of things, getting information into the hands of folks so they can more deeply understand and accompany these couples.
This did receive, I was glad to see, not only in Catholic outlets, but it did receive quite a bit. If you do a Google on this issue, if you do Google on IVF, Catholic bishops, whatever, there's quite a few secular stories that come up, and they have hyperlinks to your letter, which I was very, very glad to see. So I'm always thinking about
it. Positive.
Hey, with God, all things are possible, right, Your Excellency?
That's right. That's right.
But I do like to give credit where credit is due. The media don't often cover these types of things, but of course, it makes headlines because it's talking about fertility, which is a hot button issue as well. But again, I see this as a huge opportunity, especially during NFP Awareness Week, as we're wrapping this up, which ends tomorrow, I believe, the 25th, to really take it upon ourselves to revisit the church teachings on these issues, right?
Precisely. And, at the end of the letter, as you say, is so well done. And it's obviously one of the last notes is that the rules should protect religious liberty and conscience rights. And Teresa, people don't connect those necessarily with this issue, but this is all of a piece. And then the recommendations are really, very practical. They're spelled out in 7 recommendations. And, the final one indicates the final rule should clarify no employer having chosen to offer fertility benefits must cover any particular service and should proactively protect the religious liberty and conscience rights of employers and employees. So it's not just a matter of, quote, reproductive services, but it's also a matter of religious liberty and conscience rights.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's great is that you were joined by several other fine organizations. We just had Father Tapaholchik on yesterday on another issue, and he's with the National Catholic Bioethics Center. So they filed also public comments. The Catholic Medical Association and the National Association of Catholic Nurses filed similar letters, which I think is really important, Your Excellency, when so many prominent and well-known groups join in.
Absolutely, and we all know that typical line. There's strength in numbers. And
numbers,
when it's,
right?
When it's the numbers who are wonderful collaborators in the work for life and the gospel, claiming the gospel for life, then that's very, very helpful. And those voices, we need to raise our voices through them, and then through them together with us. It really portrays the fact that it's not the bishop standing alone, Teresa, but it's all these wonderful Catholic organizations that support Catholic teaching and want our voices across the board to be heard in the public square.
As crazy as the world gets, Your Excellency, this is a personal note. What keeps me grounded are the saints, the church teaching, obviously the Eucharist, the source and summit of the faith, but the beautiful teachings of the church and the richness of the faith and the fact that it makes so much sense. And you get the complete story because obviously the church is fullness of the truth, but so many people have not heard the horror stories about IVF or how many couples have been taken advantage of, because this is not a cheap process and it's not very successful either.
And I think what we need to do is, in a calm, rational, and charitable way, offer facts, review facts, and show people. And how often we know, Teresa, you and all the listeners know, that when people have facts placed in front of them, facts alone can change hearts. So
right.
while we certainly want them to know the teaching, but when they see the facts, for example, that IVF, which kills or freezes even more preborn children than abortion, that's a fact. So we have to step up and take a serious look at this and realize that this is not, a small matter. And I think it's the facts that help to convert minds and hearts, because when you put truthful facts in front of people, it's really, really hard not to recognize what is happening right in front of them. Yeah.
Well, as our sweet Lord says, the truth will set us free. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy, but we appreciate your work in the Diocese of Toledo and your pro-life efforts over the years, including this issue regarding encouraging the Labor Department to reject expanding IVF insurance coverage. EWTNnews.com is an extensive article on this. As His Excellency had said, you can find it at respectlife.org and also at the USCCB website. National Catholic Bioethics Center also has a piece on this. We'll be right back.
This is Frankie. Hi, this is Scully. You're listening to our Entry Tree on EWTN.
Gosh, I can't stand it. They're so adorable. I can't wait to see them. It's been a couple months. We're going to see the girls this weekend. They're going to be 10 in September. That's an old recording. I have to update it. Babies are so wonderful. Okay, I digress. I'm very excited. In the second hour, we're going to continue our conversation on the importance of silence, which we began with our first guest. Wow, this hour went by quickly. Father Timothy Gallagher, of course, his book on the saints. There's so much information about the importance of silence in our lives. And what's interesting is, we live in suburban Detroit, so we're back at our Michigan home. And I mean, we're not in the city. We're north of the city of Detroit, but it's still a very large area. We have, I think 4.5 million people in southeastern Michigan. And it's really kind of a shocker when you come back from the countryside and there's all this noise, and it's really jarring. And so I not that I'm a hermit or anything, but I can imagine how beautiful and powerful it must be for so many of our saints, St. Anthony the Abbot or St. Francis of Assisi or all these different saints, St. Ignatius, who really sought out places of silence. And so Dominic and I are getting a little bit more sense of that, of the importance of silence. And the Pope is talking about it, reminding us of it this summer. He mentioned it when he was at Castel Gandolfo. He's still there till, I think, Monday. But we'll talk about that with our very own Father John Paul Mary. He is the employee chaplain and assistant vocation director and a very familiar face at EWTN and voice. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And wrapping up a Friday morning of Catholic Connection. Great to be with you on a Friday, July 24th. This is the last full week of July, isn't it? What is it? August 1st? I'm trying to figure out. Well, no, next week. We have one more week of July. Okay, just making sure. We have a great lineup for you, though, the second hour. Excited to be with you to share more as we move into the weekend of this beautiful month of July. You know, we've been talking a lot about silence, and we mentioned the gospel. We talked about that in Fact Check Friday. We took a look at France now banning social media for 15-year-olds and under, those who are 15 and under, and how that ties in with our own spirituality. Father Timothy Gallagher's book was Thinking Like a Saint, Discernment of Spirits in the Catholic Tradition. So you can't discern if you don't have silence and quiet. And all of that starts with a stronger relationship with the Lord, obviously. So I thought I wanted to replay, and this is a great idea from my producer, Richard, a wonderful interview we did with one of our podcasters, and he's actually going to be on a couple of our programs very soon, John Edwards. He's an author, he's a speaker, and he's all about connecting with men in the pew. So we interviewed him, I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was still in Italy. And I thought it was very delightful in terms of what men can do to become better, lovers of Christ and lovers of their family. So we'll talk about that. And then my little sis, Vanessa Denhagarma, who filled in for me on Tuesday. Was it Monday or Tuesday? I can't remember. Richard and I are trying to figure out what's going on here because the time goes by so quickly. Anyhow, she did a beautiful interview with our friends at CatholicMom.com. Okay, so we are in the middle of summer. Maybe in some areas of the country, like down in Florida, I know that school starts early in August, but there's still summertime left. So what do you do with your families to keep them involved? Your kids, how do you keep them active? And how do you keep them involved in healthy stuff away from all the technology and computers? She did a beautiful interview about that, so we'll share that with you as well. And then we're going to wrap up with a live interview with, as we mentioned, our good friend and our wonderful employee chaplain, Father John Paul Mary, is going to join us and help us, of course, really dive into this whole idea of silence, looking at the Holy Father's message regarding making time for prayer and silence, especially in the summer and on vacation. I remember several years ago, Pope Benedict said, take your vacation, but don't take a vacation from the Lord. Amen to that. All right, weather-wise, excessive rainfall potential for the southeast. We have heat expanding for the center of the country and some critical fire weather for the Pacific Northwest. More specifically, the National Weather Service is saying flash flooding threatens areas from the Tennessee Valley to the Carolinas as storms repeat along a stalled front. Heavy storms may trigger flooding in the southwest. Dangerous heat is expanding across the desert southwest plains, mid-Mississippi Valley, and the southern tier. And then, as we mentioned, we have critical fire weather for interior Pacific Northwest, and cooler, dry air bringing relief to the Great Lakes and the Northeast. It is really beautiful here in Michigan. It's like 80 degrees and very comfortable, no humidity. Right now, it's 3 minutes past the hour. Let's get started on hour number 2 here on EWTN Radio Extra with the news for you. Today marking 1 month since the landscape and lives changed in Venezuela forever, following twin devastating earthquakes that has left over 5,000 dead and tens of thousands missing. South Florida's Global Empowerment Mission is working around the clock to send over 2 million pounds of food and medical supplies to survivors.
Every day we have things arriving between planes and containers have already started leaving. They should be en route and arriving first, July 31st. Should be the first round of containers arriving, but we're constantly sending every week.
That's the organization's logistics director, Billy Richards, who says they cannot do it alone. The charity needs volunteers still as it warehouses to help pack life-saving necessity kits. Meanwhile, Venezuela's Catholic bishops issuing a strong message entitled Good Samaritans, Witnesses of Hope. The earthquakes, as we know, claimed thousands of lives, over 5,000 deaths, but the bishops say the tragedy has further worsened Venezuela's already difficult social, political, and economic situation, insisting that reconstruction must not be driven by political interests or corruption that could once again put people's lives at risk. They also voiced concern over what they describe as the failure of public institutions to respond adequately to the emergency. They add, reconstruction requires us to echo the indignation of the earthquake victims who were left without adequate assistance by public institutions. Natural disasters, they say, are unpredictable, but it's a duty of state authorities to be prepared to respond to them. The Department of Justice sending a memorandum to federal departments and agencies with updated guidance on religious liberty and parental rights based on recent U.S. Supreme Court precedent. According to EWTNnews.com, that update was issued yesterday as the first revision to the guidance since 2017. It incorporates Supreme Court rulings issued after the early guidance, including rulings such on church autonomy, equal access for religious entities to grants and government programs, and the right for parents to direct the religious upbringing of their children. They say religious liberty is not merely a right to personal religious beliefs or even to the worship in a particular place. The memorandum sent by the Attorney General also said it encompasses religious observance and practice as displayed in a person's daily life. And the update goes further, saying even in the absence of Title VII exemption, both RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and the principle of church autonomy under the religious clauses of the Constitution protect religious employers' authority to make employment decisions consistent with their religious mission. In other news this morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says any action Iran takes against the U.S. will be met with overwhelming force.
I saw Arachi, their foreign minister, who the other day say or something about their policies, an eye for an eye. The president's policy is a head for an eye. I mean, honestly, that's what it's going to be. I mean, they will pay a very heavy price for the things they're doing. They're already paying a very heavy price.
Rubio issuing the warning yesterday at a summit of Asian nations in the Philippines. Both the U.S. and Iran have accused each other of violating the terms of a ceasefire that was signed last month. 17 U.S. soldiers have died in the war with Iran since March. President Trump says he's nearing a decision on a massive attack, meanwhile, against Iran. Speaking to Axios, the president saying those strikes will be bigger than the ones conducted during Operation Epic Fury. In the Big Apple, Mayor Zoran Mondani is telling his residents to take to the streets to protest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he visits the city. Meanwhile, the New York Police Department is expressing great concerns. The head of the Police Benevolent Association president, Patrick Hendry, saying the mayor's activist posturing puts police officers on the street in a terrible position. Protests during the UN General Assembly are nothing new, he said, but when the mayor of the city is actively calling for demonstrations, violent agitators will assume they have permission to cause as much havoc as possible. The mayor, meanwhile, according to the New York Post, was forced to backtrack this week by admitting he did not have the legal right or power to have the Israeli leader arrested, but he's still urging New Yorkers to protest Netanyahu, which means a lot of work for the New York Police Department. The prime minister is again expected to attend the UN General Assembly in New York, which will take place in September. President Trump is announcing a commitment from major utilities and companies that consumers will not bear the extra electricity costs of the AI data center expansions across the U.S. Speaking from the EPA headquarters yesterday, the president detailing the updated ratepayer protection pledge meant to reduce the burden of potentially skyrocketing electric bills for consumers while still keeping an edge in the AI race.
Under this groundbreaking plan, America's largest tech companies have formally committed to fund or build all energy infrastructure required to meet the demand they are placing on the grid.
Trump saying the plan includes letting the tech companies build their own power plants. The White House saying major utilities, including Nextra and Duke Energy, have signed on the ratepayer protection pledge, along with Google, Microsoft, Meta, Oracle, OpenAI, and Amazon. This as opposition to data center continues to grow, leading some states to consider construction moratoriums. 2 stabbings on Manhattan's Upper West Side are now being investigated as potential hate crimes. Jonathan O'Halloran tells us the police commissioner says the suspect was yelling Allah Akbar during both attacks.
NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch is now identifying the suspect as 51-year-old Raul Morales. Police say he approached and stabbed two people, seemingly unprovoked, in separate instances minutes apart around 1:30 Thursday afternoon. Both of the victims are expected to survive. Tisch says victim and witness statements say Morales shouted pro-Islamic statements prior to both stabbings, and that the NYPD is now looking into if the attacks were hate crimes. In New York, I'm Jonathan O'Halloran.
The remnants of Tropical Storm Bertha are moving across eastern Texas. According to the latest National Hurricane Center update, the storm's wind speeds have slowed to 35 miles per hour as it continues to lose steam. Mark Mayfield tells us of more weather issues. This in California. A heat advisory continues all the way through Monday evening, with triple-digit weather expected in many inland and valley locations.
The National Weather Service says highs could hit 107 and overnight temperatures won't cool off as much as normal. There's also an air quality alert in place for the San Fernando, San Gabriel, and Santa Clarita valleys. The hot weather is making smog worse in many locations. I'm Mark Mayfield.
In Florida, dozens of folks facing major drug charges, this after a multi-agency takedown in Palm Coast in the Daytona Beach area. The Attorney General of the state, James Uthmeyer, says Operation Icebreaker 2 netting great results.
They were caught trafficking and conspiring to traffic large amounts of fentanyl, meth, and cocaine into our communities.
Over the past year and a half, fentanyl cases are down in the state of Florida over 70%, and deaths are down over 50%. He says statewide prosecutions are also up 500% since the initiative began 2 years ago. There are more child predators being arrested nationwide and in the area of southeastern Michigan. FBI Detroit Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Marty D'Amico, was asked if the uptick is because there are more predators out there or are more of them being caught.
I think it's twofold. These predators are very prevalent, but what's become more, I guess, better for us, a better way to identify them is we're putting this public awareness out there.
D'Amico adds that the Endangered Child Alert Program that launched in 2004 to help identify people in child sex abuse and the production of child pornography has been very helpful. He says predators have more venues than ever before and adds that it's critical for parents and guardians to know who their children are talking to and what they're doing, especially online. And a delay in calling federal agents may have hurt the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. That, according to the FBI director, Kash Patel, who tells Fox News he was ready to deploy his staff to Guthrie's Southern Arizona home on day one, but they were kept out.
The first 48 hours of anyone's disappearance are the most critical. And here's how these cases works. It is a state matter. It's a state and local law enforcement matter. What we, the FBI, do is say, hey, we're here to help. What do you need? What can we do? And for 4 days, we were kept out of the investigation.
Patel crediting his teamwork with Google to retrieve critical video footage of the suspect. He also tells the outlet more information may have been available if they had received access to the video sooner. The mother of Today's Show host Savannah Guthrie has been missing since February 1st. And more than 1.5 million cartons of eggs are being recalled now because of possible salmonella contamination. The FDA says a voluntary recall was put out by Midwest Poultry Services for brown and white shell eggs. The eggs are sold under several brands in the state of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Mississippi, with labeling including Kroger, Brookshire's, Country Morning, Simple Truth, and Sunups, along with a number of bulk grade A and grade AA egg cartons. But good news, no illnesses have been reported. We'll be right back on a Friday morning, helping the men in our lives stay true to God and grow stronger in their faith. 27 minutes past the hour. It's a Monday morning. Great to be with you. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN's Catholic Connection. Great to have John Edwards, one of our podcasters, joining us this morning. He's the founder of Pew Ministries. His podcast, Just a Guy in the Pew, is one of our podcasts on EWTN that we do carry for you. So many great ones out there. John, great to have you on the program. I know that you're the founder and executive director of Pew Ministries, which is a Catholic apostolate, the mission of bringing the person of Jesus to the person in the pew. Amen to that. and you're a speaker and an evangelist, and you also have a new book, Power Made Perfect. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Teresa. It's been I've been a long-time fan of yours, and I'm glad to finally get a chance to join you.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to have you on. Tell us, first of all, about your book.
Yes, ma'am. So it's called Power Made Perfect, Finding True Strength in Christ. It just came out in June, and it's a book about my testimony and story. In some parts, I had a 17-year addiction to cocaine and was a Fortune 250 salesman of the year. I had the tiger by the tail, a beautiful family, but I had these addictions that, I unfortunately picked up in college when I walked away from my faith. And so I wrote this book for men because I was so far away from the Lord, and so many guys are today, but the Lord always wants to bring us back. And I chased the wrong things. My version of power was the things the world tells you will make you powerful, and didn't really understand that the true power that we can find is in that relationship with God, and that the true power is His. So we wrote this book about that. Dr. Bob Schutz, his publishing company, published it, and it's been out there now in just an attempt to try to help men find healing and restoration and their way back to God.
So how did you find healing and restoration? I know it's a long story. I want people to buy the book, but what do you think, looking back, John, would be the first steps that you made in the right direction, back toward God?
Sure. So vulnerability, to be honest with you, which is not a word men like to hear. Men associate that with weakness, but the book title is actually from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, where St. Paul is calling out to the Lord and asking Him to remove the spiritual thorn in his side. And God says, "No, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And for my whole life, I had tried to control everything. There was a lot of unholy self-reliance, and I thought I had to do everything because that's what the world tells men, is you have to provide and you have to figure it out and you have to do it on your own. And if you can't, you're not a man. And so for me, the same with St. Paul in that moment, I had to be vulnerable. Like, I can't fix myself. I can't get myself out of this. And the Lord met me in a jail cell and gave me a chance to be different and to change my life. That vulnerability, that honesty with what was really going on in my life led me to humility, which then led me to surrender and to repentance and reconciliation and eventually healing. And, of course, restoration's an ongoing process in our lives. So I'm in the middle of that one right now.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. I think sometimes we expect, okay, now that we're back in the church or back in a relationship with the Lord or even a new relationship with the Lord, we think everything's going to be okay, but we're still living in a fallen world, and so we still have our challenges. We're talking with author and national speaker John Edwards, founder of Pew Ministries, and he's a host of a wonderful podcast, Just a Guy in the Pew. Now, tell us a little bit about what you are seeing across the country, because you've been working and evangelizing and meeting with men and trying to start men's groups. If it's not one addiction, it could be another, given that you could be addicted to a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be, something physical in terms of drugs or, pornography or something like that. It could be, as you said, it could be addicted to our careers or something else. What are you seeing that men are facing right now, John?
Well, there's this great epidemic, and it's a silent epidemic of loneliness. I talk about men often as silent sufferers. We feel like we've got to bear the load of everything and provide and do everything, and we've got to do it on our own. We've kind of bought into the lie that, men, you have to work hard and put your head down and never complain and never have feelings and never have emotions. And when that's the case and guys are out there going through it alone, and even if they're married or whatever else, we carry a lot of those things internally and have that stress. And so what's happening is if, our parishes don't have places for guys to go to be able to be real and open and talk about, where is God in my mess? Then what often happens is guys choose the alternative of the world, which is self-medication, whether that's through anger or unforgiveness or, alcohol or drugs or pornography or whatever it may be. Guys are going to the wrong thing, and it's driving them further into isolation and loneliness. When I look at our podcast analytics, the top 5 words that people search for our podcast are despair, loneliness, isolation, wounds, brokenness. And there's a lot of men out there, and it's not just the people in the corner with a sign that says anything helps, right? It's people that look like, business owners and, guys are fully into the church. There's a lot of guys out there trying to do it on their own. And so we're trying to build places of accompaniment where guys can see, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who struggles, and I can be honest and real about that and find a relationship with Christ, first and foremost, and with other men.
I think vulnerability is an issue for everyone. I mean, obviously what you just outlined and your great experience with men, but I think all of us have that problem initially if we really want to get serious about our faith,
realizing that we do have to totally let go and let God, because nothing is going to change unless God knows that he has your full yes.
Yes, ma'am, that's true. You've got to get right with God first. And I know that can sound corny, but the Lord's been sitting there waiting on us forever. He knows our problems. He knew before we were ever born what were going to be struggles in our life and joys and successes. And he's not sitting there like some cosmic police officer waiting to punish us for the mistakes or the things that have happened to us or that we've perpetrated maybe on others. He just wants us to look at him as a loving father. And it's hard for a lot of guys because they may not have had the best relationship with their dad or a coach or, you know, whatever, someone in their life like that. And so they kind of transpose those broken relationships onto God. And we don't always see him as a loving father who's simply waiting for us to realize that. So like the prodigal son, we can return to him and not be met with punishment or ridicule or whatever, but with love and with welcome. And so that's when guys can find that. That's what really changes our life. It changes our opinion on God and those around us. We can start to be grateful for the gift that we've received and understand the gift that we receive from God, and then that spurs us on to generosity to go out and to help others find the same thing.
And don't you find as well, I'm sure you felt this, and I know all of us do, when we're ready to maybe share our testimonies, sometimes it won't be on a national platform, maybe it'll just be in a small group or with your own friends, but we're so fearful that, oh my gosh, what are they going to think of me? I'm the only one who's gone through this, right? But that's from the evil one, right?
It is. It is. He doesn't want any of us to stand up. He wants us all to be on the sideline and out of the game. And so he places those fears in there, and we listen to it. You know, we listen to the wrong voice. Often I know the evil one sounds like my voice in my head sometimes, like I'm chastising myself or beating myself up or saying people won't love me if I really show them who I am. But that's not us. That's really, as you said, the evil one. And so he knows that when you're honest and you're real, that freedom comes with that you start to break the chains that bind you, that he's got you bound with. And he doesn't want that. So, of course, he's going to continue to put those fears in you that if I really show somebody who I am, they're not going to like me. They're going to reject me. And more often than not, what people see is they respect the fact that you're honest, because probably they're struggling with something too and have been afraid to share. And so that's why vulnerability is so important. When one person decides to stand up and be honest, then it allows other people to do so too. And then it just creates this chain of people taking off the mask, putting down the facades, and opening up their hearts to each other.
Yep, absolutely. And the thing is, the devil wants us to feel that we're alone, and again, that nobody has the same issues that we have. We all have issues. Everybody's got something, as a deacon friend of ours once said. We are speaking with author and international speaker and national speaker John Edwards, and his beautiful new book is Power Made Perfect. And we'll have more on the book, where you can get it, and also reminding you about his appearance coming up on our very own Life on the Rock Part 1, Sunday, August 2nd, Part 2, August 9th, both at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be right back.
It's the dog days of summer, keeping kids active, happy, and connected to the faith. That is what we're talking about today. CatholicMom.com. Maria Morera Johnson joins us here on Catholic Connection. And I know, Maria, when my daughter was young, it was a challenge, but a lot of fun keeping her active. We did that 20 minutes of the package, to keep her abreast of what she learned the previous year, so she didn't slump into that summer slide, right? And wasn't falling behind before the next school year. So thanks for joining us, the dog days of summer. What should we be knowing about keeping our kids active? What do you want to share with us here today, Maria?
Oh, my goodness. Well, at CatholicMom.com, we have so many writers and so many beautiful women who are mothers in different seasons of life. So if you want to get some really good ideas about what to do with the kids over the summer and throughout the year, you'll find your mom that's in your circumstances, and you can hold on to that. But lately, what we've been talking about is travel. Many families try to work in their vacation time in the summer. And personally, I did a lot of staycations because I was a teacher, and the last thing I wanted to do was move anywhere. But we would do some family travel. And one of the things that we recommend and kind of really look into is how we can maintain the faith, keep it alive, keep it robust, keep it normal throughout the summer when the pool is calling you, and making a fort in the backyard is important, and maybe doing that travel to visit relatives that are far away. So we have so many beautiful articles this summer that give some cute ideas and some serious ones too.
Yeah, because it's a challenge sometimes, Maria, to figure out what, now what do we do today? What do we do today? So, and I talked about how I did the summer packet with my daughter that the school supplied to us, right? That it was like 20 minutes of learning and the rest of the day was open. How important is consistency? We'd have a routine, breakfast, the packet, and then figure out what to do for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially for myself. I was a teacher. And so I liked the routine, and I think that our children respond well to routine. Many of the activities in the summer are rather structured. Sometimes kids can go to camp or a day camp. There's always the ubiquitous VBS in the community. So there are activities that are on a timeline. And so I think that kids also need to be bored a little bit, but for the most part, they respond well to getting up at a normal hour. Maybe the older kids want to sleep in until noon, and that's up to the parents to decide about. But usually in August, I started getting them back into what their school routine was going to look like, especially. Gave them a break at the early part of the summer, but kind of eased them back in. When the school supplies come out, that's when.
Yeah. That's a good.
I think it's like right
marker.
Now.
Well, that's probably a good marker because they got to get back into that waking up at a certain time and being rested and being ready for the school day. So that's a good point. Is getting them back into that school routine. They probably don't like it, but and school supplies I think do come out a little too early sometimes, right? But it's
right
a good marker.
Along with Halloween.
Yeah, you're right. So,
it is a marker.
Yeah, it's a good marker. Maria Morera Johnson's with us, CatholicMom.com. We're talking about the dog days of summer, keeping kids active, happy, and connected to the faith. Let's talk about that, connected to the faith and not connected to, social media and electronics all the time. Talk to us about that, Maria.
I love it. There's an article by Ann DeSantis that we have running that's called Keeping the Faith Alive in the Summer. Her whole concept is that when faith is woven naturally into the summer, it feels less like another task, right? Just more of a way of seeing the world. So find moments to include prayer in your day. I think most of us will pray right before meals. That's a good thing. But what if when you take a walk in the afternoon when it gets a little cooler and you pray the rosary? Or if the children are too small, perhaps, you can pray a decade of the rosary. Our founder, Venerable Patrick Peyton at Holy Cross Family Ministries, is the priest who said the family that prays together stays together. So finding these opportunities are a beautiful way to just integrate the faith so that it's normalized, so that it is a part of who you are. It's a part of the family identity. Find field trips with a twist. Sure, you might go to Six Flags, but what if you go to a basilica that's in your area? Things like that. Having we find ourselves in nature quite often. Perhaps a prayer of gratitude when you see a beautiful flower or you encounter, a little critter out in the wild. Wouldn't that be just a beautiful way to just be a reminder that we are beloved by a beautiful Father who's a creator?
Yeah, I remember I used to take my daughter to a playground at a Catholic school in the summer, and sometimes we'd pop into the church and just sit for a few minutes and just pray or, look at the crucifix and put holy water on us. It's just that, you get some time in the playground, but you're at a Catholic school and the church was often open. So there's little things that you can do just to kind of keep instilling the faith throughout the summer months, throughout their life. Maria Morera Johnson with us, CatholicMom.com. The dog days of summer, keeping kids active, happy, connected to the faith. Let's talk about keeping them disconnected from technology and the challenges that could be for some families when some kids are so addicted to their iPads and iPhones.
Oh, there's also a great article by Shelley Henley Kelly called Make Family Travel Meaningful and Memorable. And she talks about the things that you can do on a road trip, but honestly, it expands to everything that you're talking about because get together to play cards and have the children join you in making these summer plans. It doesn't mean that they have to, think about how to get a hotel or how to, book a flight. But hey, we're going to go visit Grandma on the West Coast, and these are some things that you can see on the West Coast. What is your favorite thing, or what is your number one bucket item? Involve the kids. That's such a beautiful thing to do. After all, the family that is praying together is staying together, right? It's a beautiful way to give everybody their voice and make everyone seen in a vacation setting, but throughout the summer.
You know what? I love that. You make a really good point. It doesn't have to be a major decision, but even something like give them choices between a couple different restaurants to go to on vacation. Or, do you guys want to go here tonight or there tonight? Or do you want to do this activity today or this activity today? Let them choose between the list that you have figured out that you want to do during your vacation, and they feel more involved. That's a really good point. We have about a minute left with you here, Maria. What else do you want to share with our listeners about the dog days of summer and keeping our kids active from CatholicMom.com?
Oh, one of the great things that I read was adding praise and worship songs to your regular music playlist. Isn't that great?
Yes,
Have a little
that's
dance
a great
party.
idea. Yes, I love that.
Yeah, so it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So join us at Catholic Mom. There's going to be more stories about summer, and you know what's happening. Those school supplies are coming out, making that transition into fall and school.
What, just a few seconds here, Maria, what inspired you to do the work that you're doing with CatholicMom.com? Just kind of give us an overview. I know you're a school teacher, but what about it brings you joy? Oh, we ran out of time. I'm sorry, Maria.
No worries. No worries.
I'm sorry. There's the music. That's the cue. God bless you and all that you do. And thanks for joining us here on Catholic Connection. CatholicMom.com, Maria Johnson with us. We're going to come back with Kelly Sullivan from Newman Guide News. Don't go away.
Wrapping up a Friday morning, thanks to Vanessa for that lovely interview on summertime. I thought it would be fun to play, kind of tying in with our theme and getting back to the basics, and especially this beautiful thing that we need more in our lives, silence, silencio, as we say in Italian. To speak with us about this very important topic is our very own Father John Paul Mary. And he, of course, is well known to our EWTN listeners and viewers. He was ordained in 2013, and he serves as EWTN's employee chaplain and our assistant vocations director. Father, great to speak with you again. So here we have, we're in the middle of summer. Well, depending on where people live, I know that sometimes in different states, it may be a little bit later than that and school starts soon. But the idea of silence, the Holy Father has mentioned this more than once, and even recently talking about how important it is when we go on vacation to make sure that we have silence and that we continue our prayer life. What are your thoughts on that? And thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Teresa. I'm down in Midland, Texas, with the GRN family, giving them a retreat. All the employees of GRN that could be here. So I just wanted to extend a very warm welcome to the GRN Radio Family Network. And thank you for all of the benefactors out there that contribute to Catholic Radio. I just wanted to say that very quickly because we couldn't do the work that we do without our benefactors that contribute to our work. What is very interesting, I think, with this pontificate, Pope Leo, Pope Francis talked a lot about silence as well, but I think as an Augustinian, Pope Leo has a contemplative dimension to his life, especially being in community life, a very liturgical life. And I've picked that up as well. I'm glad that you noticed that there's this dimension that Pope Leo wants to impart to the church of liturgical prayer, of silence. There's an image in most sacristies, I think, that a lot of people, maybe in Europe, are familiar with. That if you travel through Europe, you've seen a picture of a Dominican with his finger over his lips, and he's basically saying, shh,
yep,
silence, silencio, silence. And we're afraid of it. We're afraid of just sitting with the Lord in silence, with nothing in front of us, not our phones, not our tablet, just to sit in silence before Mass, after Mass, even during Mass. That's what I love about, I think in the Catholic tradition, there is so much silence. With the Novus Ordo, the new rite of the Mass, there's, I think, a little bit less emphasis on silence. In the extraordinary form, there's a lot of silence. So I think people are really off-put by silence and what to do, how to enter into silence. So I'd like to just simply offer the word to people. The very first thing that you do in the day, don't look at your social media. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at your iPad, your computer. Don't look at blue light, but simply begin that time in silence and go outside. Look at the sun. Look at the light. Take in the beauty of nature. The sounds that are just every day. The wind, the birds. That's part of silence too. Listening to, just the sounds within the natural order.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And you know that Deacon Dom and I live part-time in Italy, and we live in the countryside. We're about 35 minutes from Assisi. And Umbria, as you know, Father, because you've been there many times, is such a peaceful area of Italy, central Italy. And I was telling my listeners in the first hour this morning that when we come back, as we are now back in the United States, we live in southeastern Michigan, a very nice suburb, but it's so busy compared to our place in Italy that when we come back here, the noise, just the everyday living of the cars and the trucks and the busyness, it's jarring. It really is. And one of our favorite things to do is to do our morning readings and to pray on our little balcony, which just looks out over on the countryside. And you really feel the nature. You hear the birds, the wind going through the wheat and the farmlands or the trees. It's so prevalent there. The church bells, all those beautiful sounds of God, as opposed to just the noise of the world.
Well, Teresa, silence is not an absence.
Right.
But really, I think sacred silence is actually a presence. Let's emphasize that. Like God is always speaking. So you want to, those times of silence in our life, don't look at the silence as like an absence, that I just need to fill this up with something in order to keep me busy, to keep my mind busy. No, silence is actually an opportunity to encounter a presence, to encounter the one who created you, the one who redeems you, the one who sanctifies you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Silence is meant to be embraced as just an awareness that God wants to fill that time with himself, just inviting the Lord in and giving him permission to fill that time, that void.
And the beautiful thing, and I'm sure you've had this experience many times, but even if you're sitting outside and it's very quiet, and I find myself saying to God, thank you for making this, thank you for making that. You did a really good job here in Italy. I think it's one of your great works. You just have this kind of conversation with them. I've noticed that I'll be sitting there, and when I pray, when I give glory and thanks to God, all of a sudden there'll be a soft breeze that comes across my face. And maybe I'm crazy and maybe I'm making too much of it, but I really believe that's God saying, thanks for noticing.
I think it's a kiss, divine kiss.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's really the intimacy of God. What's beautiful, I'm just looking outside, looking out at the beautiful trees and just seeing I'm looking at the branches and the small leaves, and they're moving a little bit. I can't see the wind that's moving them, but I can see its effects. Mm-hmm. So the greatest things in life, Pope Benedict XVI says, are those things that which we cannot see. There's so many things, Teresa, that we can't see in the spiritual realm And even in the natural realm, I can't see the wind that's moving this branch, but I know that it's there. I know that it exists. There's so many things that we can't see in the spiritual realm too. We can't see and perceive our angels, but they're there. We know that they're there by faith. There's so much, in the sacraments too. What we see and perceive with our senses, with the sacraments, with the Eucharist, we see what appears to be bread. What looks like bread, tastes like bread, smells like bread, feels like bread, is no longer bread anymore after the consecration, right?
Right.
So there's so many things in this life that we cannot see and perceive that are real. And I think if we get in touch with silence and we embrace the Lord in silence, the Lord has so much to, quote unquote, say in the silence. He does speak in silence.
If you think about it, and you know this well, being part of the Franciscan family of EWTN, St. Francis, I think, is a great example in this. He went through so much effort. I mean, and we're talking, 800 years ago, we're marking the 800th anniversary of his passing in October. He went to so much effort to build these different hermitages, these places of retreat, whether it be, of course, Laverna, where he received the wounds of Christ, the stigmata, or above Assisi, or in Greccio, all these different places around Italy where he established these places of prayer and total silence and peace.
Interesting. Teresa, I've never made that connection. Thank you for bringing that up, that, St. Francis was in prayer, in silence, when he experienced and was imprinted with the sacred wounds of Jesus, the stigmata.
Right.
I think a lot of people think about Francis and they think of Francis in the garden, which is a great thing. To St. Francis loved and embraced all of creation because he saw in creation the fingerprints of God. That this is right. God's beauty. But when I think of St. Francis, I think of the stigmatized Father Francis, the stigmatized Holy Father Francis. And it's a beautiful thought. I've never really thought about that before, that in prayer, in silence, it was that Francis being imprinted with the wounds of Jesus, that he had that image of the crucified Christ wrapped in a seraphim coming, and there were the beams from the wounds of Jesus that literally pierced his own flesh.
And so many of the saints give that to us. For example, we went to a new place before we came back to the United States a few weeks ago. We've been to Cascia many times, for the great Saint Rita of Cascia, but we had never been to her nearby hometown of Rocco Pereira. And you talk about another saint who sought silence and sought prayer because she had so many challenges in her married life with her children and her husband. There is a small, I don't want to call it a mountain, it's a very large hill, but on top of this hill in Rocco Pereira is this large rock where she would go to pray. And if you read about her, and I'm sure you know this well, she was visited by angels because she would go to pray for her son. She would go to pray for her husband, for all the infighting that was going on in her area with different families, all the feuds. And that is you have to climb up 300 steps. And now the steps are pretty smooth and they're very convenient for pilgrims. But if you think about St. Francis, right, climbing all the way up the mountain in Laverna or up to Greccio down in Lazio, or you think about St. Rita of Cascia, and of course her hometown being Rocco Pereira, climbing up to this rock, so sincere about seeking silence and getting as close to God as possible. If that doesn't tell us a need that we have to do better at this, Father, I don't know what does.
Every year on October 2nd, I always say, unfailingly, I'm not going to forget you, my guardian angel. It's like every year when it comes around, I think I'm going to make a new commitment to ask my guardian angel for help. And I quickly forget the presence and the power and really the obligation that we have, the duty that we have to call upon our guardian angel. They are powerful before God. They behold the face of God. And I think that our guardian angel can help us to pray, can help us to even embrace silence. So I like to encourage our viewers, our listeners rather, on radio, to embrace the silence and know that you're not alone. Know that you have the angels and saints with you to help you.
Absolutely. Will you be talking about silence on the retreat today with our friends at Guadalupe Radio?
I just finished up, actually. I just did a commissioning of the GRN employees and blessed St. Benedict medals, and I allowed them to touch them to relics that I have of St. Francis and St. Rita of Cascia and St. Francis Xavier Cabrini and St. Francis Xavier, St. Peter Claver, and St. Vincent Ferrer, and also a piece of Padre Pio's cloth that touched his wounded side. So they have third-class relics that they're taking home with them, sacramental. Yep.
Wonderful, Father. Thank you so much. What a great discussion, and I wish all the folks at GRN well, and also to all of our listeners.
Thank you.
We'll be right back to let you know what's coming up on a Monday. God bless you too, Father. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Wishing you a beautiful Friday and a beautiful, peaceful weekend. And don't forget the importance of silence in our lives. So you don't have to, it's great if you can go to a foreign land or to go someplace in the middle of the forest or something, but you don't have to. You can go in your own backyard or go to a corner of your house or your apartment. Look out the window and be alone with God. You'll be surprised when you slow down and you look outside. I don't care if it's just a little garden outside or you look on the street. As Father said, look at the trees. I love trees. I think that I shall never see something as beautiful as a tree, or something like that. Wasn't that Elizabeth Barrett Browning, or was that Edna St. Vincent Millay? I have to go back to my years of English class in college and high school. Anyhow, nature speaks of God, and that's why I love St. Francis so much, because he was so in tune with nature. And you go to these various, very remote places, as I say in my new book on Francis, Italy Shrines and Wonders, Volume 2, the effort and the extent to which he went to be closer to God through nature. It wasn't because he just liked animals and wanted to plant nice gardens and whatnot. No, he sought out God in the silence. As it says in the Old Testament book of 1 Kings, God is not found in the thunder or the noise or the storms. He is found in the quiet. Mother Teresa talks about that a lot as well. Coming up Monday, we are going to be talking and not be silent with Matt Swaim, because he brings us great testimonies every week about the people that visit them at the wonderful program at EWTN, The Journey Home. We're going to be talking with a former agnostic about his journey. Should be very interesting. Have a great weekend. God bless you. Talk to you then. Ciao, ciao.